by Ji-Young Lee. He is an associate professor of sociology at the University of Toronto. Ji-Young, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the social justice component here of the whole gun problem. We know that there's no cure-all, no panacea, right? You can't spend, legislate, arrest, or even intellectualize your way out of this problem. It seems like guns equal power and respect and opportunity for a lot of young people, primarily, who just don't have any of those things in their life, and they're willing to settle scores, sometimes over the most inane things. That's a tough hill to climb.
It is a tough hill, and I think I just wanted to say first, my heart goes out to the family and the community that is mourning this tragic loss. As a new parent, I can't even imagine the pain that they must feel. So our solutions to this problem, first of all, we need to ensure that families and communities that are mourning have access to long-term mental health care. In a country where we have universal health care, it's shocking that many people who are walking around with trauma can't seek out care and get help for that. But as you were mentioning, yeah, the problem is that we have segments of society, racialized youth, in Canada, mostly Black and Indigenous youth, who are more likely to become victims in shootings, who are more likely to become offenders in shootings. And those behaviors are linked to unequal neighborhood conditions that funnel the most marginalized segments of those neighborhoods into street gangs, into illicit street activities, which greatly increase their risks of becoming involved in shootings. So any real solution has to address that, and that's a long-term commitment.
And you know, when it comes to the law and order and the crime and punishment piece here, you know, everyone's tied up in knots, right, Ji-Young? Because, you know, the solutions of more cops, tougher laws, sentencing, parole and bail conditions, and even gun bans and tighter at the border, that doesn't seem to be doing the trick.
Yeah, and I think part of the problem, and I think you're kind of alluding to the fact that this is a complex problem that requires complex solutions. So often we get into this habit of thinking that there's a magic bullet, that there's this one policy lever that a magic wand we can wave, and all of a sudden it goes away. But it's really all of these things in combination. It's addressing gun laws. We know that from generations of research that restricting access to firearms leads to reductions in shootings. We know that violence interrupter programs work. We know that police are an important part of the solution. So we have to avoid that mode of thinking that says there's one magic bullet.
Yeah, we need to include the police in the equation because, you know, and that comes in parcel with eliminating that sort of street cred culture that says, you know, no snitching, the cops are the enemy, you can't trust them, they provide no amnesty or protection. That leads a lot of times to vigilantism or people looking for their own payback. How does all that square, Ji-Young, with this current trend of defunding, detasking, disarming, or even abolishing police?
Well, I think that conversation is something that is related to the first point I made, which is about systemic racism in our society. So, you know, so often our default in the aftermath of a string of shootings or even one tragic shooting is to say we have to get tough on crime, we have to fund policing, and those solutions don't work. They don't work long term. There's no sustainable model for just putting police in a community and then gun violence goes away. So the question to defund is like how many of these victims, how many people who get involved in gangs could we save by investing in them, by investing in the youth who are most likely to become involved in shootings?
You know, you brought up the mental health piece. I've often heard experts talk about the whole gun problem, you know, sort of through the prism of public health as a virus, a contagion, you know, to diagnose it, you know, as kind of a disease when you talk about how it's pervasive through at-risk and priority neighborhoods.
Yeah, so the public health model is one where you sort of identify the individuals who are most likely to become involved in violence. So some of the social network research that has come out over the last decade has basically shown that there's a very small percentage of people in at-risk networks that are most likely to get involved in shootings. So if we can identify who those individuals are, we can inoculate or protect the rest of the community by funneling intervention, mentoring, resources into these individuals. So those kinds of programs definitely do work.
It's going to take political will and scale, and I know we're all dealing with this virus and other big issues like climate, but we've got to flatten the crime, the violent crime curve, at the same time as we flatten the COVID curve and the climate curve. Ji-Yeun Lee from the U of T, thanks so much. Great insight.
Thank you for having me.